Lisbon and Portugal.
Table of contents, Lisbon and Portugal.
All about Lisbon and Portugal, with visiting and touring information, geography, history, attractions, and other points of interest.
Dr. Sydney Soclof. Dr. Sydney22@gmail.com. 2023. Narration by Dr. Sydney Soclof,
Zoe Phonemes,
and Nathan Koltove. For a complete discussion of YouTube navigation, please go to tiny.1/ytnavigator. Lisbon and Portugal.
This is the flag of Portugal. This is the Portugal coat of arms.
This is the Portuguese national anthem.
During the 15th and 16th centuries, Portugal eclipsed most other nations in terms of economic, political, and cultural influence, and it had an extensive empire throughout the world.
The Portuguese empire was the earliest and longest-lived of the modern European colonial empires, spanning almost 6 centuries. From the capture of Ceuta in North Africa in 1415 to the handover of Macau to China in 1999. Starting in the 15th century, Portuguese explorers such as Vasco da Gama and Pedro Álvares Cabral carved out a large empire for Portugal with vast colonies in South America and Africa as well as colonies in Asia. Portugal, under the tutelage of Prince Henry the Navigator and the voyages of Vasco da Gama, was one of the first to explore the Atlantic Ocean and was the first to find a route around Africa to the Spice Islands of Asia.
The Portuguese colonies indeed rivaled those of Spain in extent. At one time, it was the tiny country of Portugal that was at the forefront of world exploration. The Portuguese began their colonial history in the 15th century with a colony established in Angola, followed by Mozambique and other colonies in Africa, and then in South America, notably Brazil, and Asia.
This empire finally ended some 500 years later, when the last colony that Portugal released was Macau in 1999. Portugal was one of the last countries to hold on to a colony into the late 20th century.
The year 1415 marked the beginning of the Portuguese Empire, with the Portuguese Armada along with King John I and his sons Prince Duarte, future king, Prince Pedro, Prince Henry the Navigator, and Prince Alfonso, also with the legendary Portuguese hero Nuno Álvares Pereira.
They departed for Ceuta in North Africa, a rich trade Islamic center. On August 21, 1415, Ceuta was conquered by Portugal, and the long-lived Portuguese Empire was founded. Although he was called Prince Henry the Navigator by the English, Prince Henry never actually sailed on any of the voyages of discovery he sponsored.
Instead, Prince Henry established a school to study the arts of navigation, map-making, and shipbuilding. This would allow sailors to guide their ships better and develop new ship designs.
The Madeira Islands archipelago is the first discovery of the exploratory period, initiated by Henry, the Navigator of Portugal.
For many years Venice and the Muslims of the Ottoman Empire had a monopoly on the spice trade between Asia and Europe.
This was especially true after the fall of Constantinople to the Ottoman Turks in 1453.
The financial incentive to discover an alternative to Venice's monopoly control of the trade routes to Asia was the single most important factor in starting the Great Age of Exploration. Unable to break the hold of Venice, There was a determination in the last third of the 15th century to build ships and venture in search of another route to the spice-producing countries of Asia. Portuguese explorers began exploring the coast of Africa in 1419. Using the latest developments in navigation, cartography, and maritime technology such as the caravel, to find a sea route to the source of the lucrative spice trade. In 1488, Bartholomew Dias rounded the Cape of Good Hope at the southern tip of Africa. John II, King of Portugal in the Algarves, later renamed it Cabo da Boa Esperança, or Cape of Good Hope, because of the great optimism caused by the opening of a sea route to India in the east.
This is the voyage of Bartholomew Dias, rounding the Cape of Good Hope, at the southern tip of Africa in 1488.
Most of the Portuguese expeditions of the Age of Discovery left from Lisbon during the 15th through 17th centuries, including Vasco da Gama's departure to India in 1497. The 16th century marks the golden age for Portugal.
This began the famous voyages of discovery. Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama found a route around the southern tip of Africa to India in 1498.
This is the route followed in Vasco da Gama's first voyage from 1497 to 1499.
Here Vasco da Gama lands at Calicut, India in 1498.
The Portuguese broke the monopoly of Venice, overcame the Muslim domination of the spice trade, and created a large trade in a great variety of merchandise between Europe and the Far East, and opened up a new world.
For more than 100 years Portugal was the dominant power, but eventually yielded to English and Dutch enterprise and conquest.
Pedro Álvares Cabral was a Portuguese navigator and explorer, regarded as the first European discoverer of the sea route to Brazil in 1500. After the Portuguese established their colony in East Africa, they looked to the Americas.
In 1500, either by accident or by the Portuguese crown's secret intent, Pedro Álvares Cabral made landfall on the coast of South America, leading to the establishment of the colony of Brazil. This is Cabral's ship.
The Portuguese MP was guaranteed by the Papal Decree of 1493 and the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494. This divided the world outside of Europe exclusively between the Portuguese and the Spanish. As a result of this, all of Africa and almost all of Asia would belong to Portugal, while almost all the New World would belong to Spain.
This shows the Papal Decree line of 1493, giving Portugal a very thin slice of the eastern part of South America. The following year Spain and Portugal agreed in the Treaty of Tordesillas to move the dividing line about 800 miles west. This eventually led to the Portuguese colony of Brazil and gave South America a bilingual European heritage. Today Portuguese is the language of Brazil, while Spanish is spoken in most of the rest of the continent. From 1580 to 1640, the throne of Portugal was held by the Habsburg kings of Spain, resulting in the biggest colonial empire in history.
The Portuguese Empire was still very large even into the early years of the 19th century, with Brazil, Angola, Mozambique, and many other smaller colonies. Portugal established trading ports at far-flung locations like Goa, Ormuz, Malacca, Kochi, the Maluku Islands, Macau, and Nagasaki. Guarding its trade against both European and Asian competitors, Portugal dominated not only the trade between Asia and Europe, but also much of the trade between different regions of Asia, such as India, Indonesia, China, and Japan.
Shortly after the discovery of America by Columbus, Portuguese explorers sailed around the Cape of Good Hope and around the world thanks to revolutionary shipbuilding techniques. Lisbon became the European hub of commerce with Africa, India, the Far East, and later Brazil, exploring riches like spices, slaves, sugar, textiles, and other goods. Jesuit missionaries, such as the Basque Francis Xavier, followed the Portuguese to spread Roman Catholic Christianity to Asia with mixed success.
Starting with the independence of Brazil in 1822, the loss of the African colonies in the 20th century, and ending with the handover of Macau to China in 1999, Portugal gradually lost its once vast colonial empire. The Madeira Islands and the Azores, however, remain integral parts of Portugal.
Chapter 3. Lisbon and Portugal today.
Portugal, officially the Portuguese Republic, is in southwestern Europe on the Iberian Peninsula, and is the westernmost country of mainland Europe. Portugal is bordered by Spain to the north and east and by the Atlantic Ocean to the west and south, several hundred miles to the west in the Atlantic Ocean. The archipelagos of the Azores and Madeira are also integral parts of Portugal.
The Azores is an archipelago composed of 9 major islands. In the North Atlantic, the full Portuguese name for the Azores is Arquipélago dos Açores.
The Azores are 1,000 miles, 1,600 kilometers, west of Portugal and are part of that nation. In addition to the Azores, another Portuguese possession in the Atlantic is the Madeira Islands. The Madeira Islands are in the Atlantic Ocean 360 miles or 580 kilometers to the west of the North African country of Morocco and southwest of Portugal. From Funchal, the capital and main city of Madeira, to Lisbon in Portugal is 605 miles, or 974 kilometers.
From Funchal to Gibraltar the distance is 700 miles, or 1130 kilometers.
This shows the location of Portugal, the Madeira Islands, Gibraltar, and Morocco. To the south of the Madeira Islands are the Canary Islands, a possession of Spain.
Portugal has a low coastal plain near the Atlantic coast, but becomes increasingly hilly and mountainous as the border with Spain is approached toward the east.
Lisbon, with a city population of 0.6 million and 3.3 million in the Greater Lisbon region, is the capital and by far the largest city of Portugal. Other important cities in Portugal include Porto, 260,000, the second largest city, and a seaport and industrial center, and Coimbra, 150,000, an educational and administrative center.
Portugal is a rapidly urbanizing country, although more than 1/3 of the population is still rural. This is a large percentage compared to other countries in Western Europe. The population is densest in the Lisbon area and the Porto area in the north.
Portugal has a long history of emigration. By the early 20th century, Portuguese emigrants went to the Americas, especially to Brazil, in search of better lives. During the 1960s, many Portuguese migrated to nearby industrialized European countries in search of work. What time is it in Portugal? Let us look at the time zones in Europe. We see that the Mediterranean Sea spans 3 time zones. On the western end is Spain at GMT +1. But Portugal, as well as Morocco, are on GMT, the same as the UK.
Portuguese is a Latin language, very similar to Spanish. If you can speak or understand Spanish, you will not have any problems in Portugal. Here are some common phrases.
Portugal is a Roman Catholic country by history and tradition. Today, About 91% of the population is Catholic. The Constitution guarantees freedom of religion. However, the Catholic Church receives no direct financial support from the state. Church attendance has declined in recent decades, especially in urban areas and in the south. But Catholicism remains central to Portuguese life, especially in rural interior areas. Portugal has many local saints who are celebrated in popular festivals and annual pilgrimages. The village of Fatima is where the Virgin Mary is reported to have appeared to 3 children in 1917.
Fatima remains a popular pilgrimage site, attracting both Portuguese and large numbers of Spaniards. Lisbon is the capital and largest city of Portugal.
And in Portuguese is Lisboa.
Lisbon is the leading administrative and services center and the nation's principal port, a crossroads of road and rail routes, an international air hub, and home to many industries.
The rich architecture, numerous museums, and pleasant climate of Lisbon attract visitors from around the world. Lisbon is also the seat of the district of Lisbon and the capital of the Lisbon region.
Lisbon has a municipal population of 0.6 million, while the Lisbon metropolitan area has around 2.8 million inhabitants. A total of 3.3 million people live in the broader agglomeration of the district of Lisbon, which includes cities ranging from Leiria to Setúbal. Due to its economic output, the standard of living, and market size, the Grande Lisboa, Greater Lisbon, region is among the major financial and economic centers of the entire Iberian Peninsula.
Lisbon is the westernmost capital in mainland Europe.
Lisbon is in the west of the country, on the Atlantic Ocean coast at the point where the Tagus River, or in Portuguese, Tejo, flows into the Atlantic Ocean.
The Vasco da Gama Bridge over the Tagus River near Lisbon is the longest in Europe.
Here is Lisbon in the Tagus River estuary.
This shows the location of the Ponte 25 de Abril Bridge near where cruise ships dock.
Chapter 5. The climate of Lisbon.
Lisbon's climate is strongly influenced by the Gulf Stream and is one of the mildest of the European capitals. Here are the average high and low temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit throughout the year in Lisbon.
Here are the temperatures in degrees Celsius in Lisbon. Spring is cool to warm, between 10 degrees Celsius and 27 degrees Celsius, with plenty of sunshine and some showers. Summer months are mostly sunny, dry, and hot with temperatures between 16 degrees Celsius to 36 degrees Celsius. Autumn is mild and unsettled with temperatures between 8 degrees Celsius and 23 degrees Celsius, and winters are typically rainy, windy, and cool with some sunny days, 2 degrees Celsius to 18 degrees Celsius, usually staying at an average of 10 degrees Celsius.
Rainfall in Lisbon.
Here is the rainfall throughout the year in Lisbon. The yearly total is 16 inches or 40 centimeters. Snowfall is a very rare occurrence before 2006. No snowfall had been registered for over 40 years.
Chapter 6. The history of Lisbon and Portugal.
It is thought that around 1200 BC, there was a Phoenician trading post in the center of present-day Lisbon. The magnificent harbor provided by the estuary of the river Tagus made it the ideal spot for a settlement to provide foodstuffs to Phoenician ships traveling to the tin mines of Cornwall in England. The Romans conquered the region and named Lisbon Alta in 205 BC. Lisbon was ruled by a series of Germanic tribes from the 5th century, to 714 AD. The Iberian Peninsula was invaded by the Muslims beginning in 711 AD.
Lisbon was in the newly created Roman province of Lusitania.
From the time of Muhammad in 622 AD, Islam spread very rapidly from Arabia over the Middle East and westward across North Africa to Morocco on the Atlantic coast. In 711 AD, the Islamic Moors from North Africa, mainly Berber with some Arab, invaded the Iberian Peninsula, destroying the Visigothic kingdom. By 750, the Moors had conquered most of present-day Spain and Portugal. The Moors were the Muslim inhabitants of the western Mediterranean lands of present-day Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia.
Under Moorish rule, Spanish cities such as Seville and Granada in Spain, as well as Fez and Marrakesh in Morocco, became places where the people prospered under a tolerant rule, which also focused on scholarly advances in science, mathematics, astronomy, geography, as well as medicine. The Moorish influence is still present in Alfama, the old part of Lisbon that survived the 1755 Lisbon earthquake. Many place names are derived from Arabic. The Alfama, the oldest existing district of Lisbon, for example, is derived from the Arabic Alhama. In 1147, as part of the Reconquista, a group of combined French, English, German, and Portuguese knights, led by Alfonso I of Portugal, reconquered Lisbon.
The Lisbon Cathedral was built after 1147 over the remnants of the mosque of the Islamic period.
Lisbon was incorporated into the Kingdom of Portugal.
Islamic rule in the Iberian Peninsula finally ended in 1492 with the fall of Granada to the forces of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, marking the completion of the Reconquista of Spain and Portugal from the Moors.
Lisbon became the capital of the Kingdom of Portugal at the time of King Alfonso I.
In the 15th and 16th centuries, Lisbon was an economic and trading center. Its harbor distributed exports from the Portuguese colonies, such as spices, gold, sugar, and slaves, to Europe.
During the last centuries of the Middle Ages, Lisbon expanded substantially and became an important trading post with both Northern Europe and Mediterranean cities.
Shortly after the discovery of America by Columbus, Portuguese explorers sailed around the Cape of Good Hope, after Vasco da Gama, and around the world, Magellan, thanks to revolutionary shipbuilding techniques.
Lisbon became the European hub of commerce with Africa, India, the Far East and, later, Brazil, exploring riches like spices, slaves, sugar, textiles, and other goods.
The new territories discovered brought a prosperous age to Portugal. Arts and architecture evolved to the eccentric Manueline style.
The Manueline style was named after King Manuel I, whose reign, 1495 to 1521, coincided with its development. The Manueline style was much influenced by the astonishing successes of the voyages of discovery of Portuguese navigators, from the coastal areas of Africa to the discovery of Brazil, and the ocean routes to the Far East. It drew heavily on the style and decorations of East Indian temples. The exuberant Manueline style left its mark in two 16th-century Lisbon monuments, the Belém Tower and the Jerónimos Monastery, both declared World Heritage Sites by UNESCO. The Manueline, or Portuguese Late Gothic, is the sumptuous, composite Portuguese style of architectural ornamentation of the first decades of the 16th century. Incorporates maritime elements and representations of the discoveries brought from the voyages of Vasco da Gama and Pedro Álvares Cabral.
The construction of churches and monasteries in Manueline was largely financed by the proceeds of the lucrative spice trade with Africa and India.
This style was only a short period of about 30 years, from 1490 to 1520. The influence of the style, however, outlived the king, and it played an important part in the Portuguese art history. Celebrating the newly established maritime power, the Manueline style manifested itself in architecture, churches, monasteries, palaces, castles, and extended into other arts such as sculpture, painting, works of art made of precious metals, faience, and furniture.
A period of decline followed the Age of Discoveries. In 1580, Portugal lost its independence when the Spanish Habsburg Philip II claimed the Portuguese throne. Portugal would not recover its independence until 1640, when the royal House of Bragança established itself.
In the early 18th century, gold from Brazil flooded the country and city, allowing King John V to sponsor the building of several Baroque churches and theaters in the town.
Lisbon had a golden age in the 18th century, due to the gold from mines in Brazil. São Roque Church has one of the richest Baroque interiors in Europe, and is said to be the world's most expensive chapel.
November 1755 Lisbon Earthquake.
On November 1, 1755, Lisbon was destroyed by an earthquake. The earthquake killed between 60,000 and 90,000 people and destroyed 85% of the city.
After the 1755 earthquake, the city was rebuilt according to the plans of Sebastião José de Carvalho e Melo, the Marquis of Pombal. The Lowy town is called in honor of him Baixa Pombalina, Pombalan downtown.
Instead of rebuilding the medieval town, Pombal decided to demolish the remains of the earthquake and rebuild the downtown following modern urban rules.
In the first years of the 19th century, Portugal was invaded by the troops of Napoleon Bonaparte. Queen Maria I and Prince Regent João, future John VI, temporarily fled to Brazil.
After a military coup, dictator Antonio Salazar took power in 1926.
This is Salazar on the cover of a 1945 Time magazine, where he is called the Dean of Dictators.
The Dictator, and his successor Marcelo Caetano, exploited the domestic workers and the African colonies, and they ruled for a total of 48 years.
Portugal recovered its parliamentary republic in 1974 in the Carnation Revolution. The Carnation Revolution, Portuguese, Revolução das Cravas, was an almost bloodless, leftist, military-led coup d'état in Lisbon that changed the Portuguese regime from an authoritarian dictatorship to liberal democracy.
The Carnation Revolution was unusual in that the revolutionaries did not use direct violence to achieve their goals. The population, holding red carnations, cravos in Portuguese, convinced the regime's soldiers not to resist.
The soldiers readily swapped their bullets for flowers. It was the end of the Estado Novo, the longest authoritarian regime in Western Europe, but not the last to end, because Francisco Franco ruled Spain until his death in 1975.
The revolution is often simply referred to as its celebratory holiday, O 25 de Abril, the 25th of April.
Nowadays Portugal is a stable democracy, especially after it entered the European Economic Union in 1986. The country is quickly catching up with the more modern European economies.
Since the beginning of 2002, Portugal has been in the European Monetary Union and uses the euro as its official currency. Expo 98 was held in Lisbon.
The theme of the fair was the oceans. A heritage for the future, chosen in part to commemorate 500 years of Portuguese discoveries. The timing was intended to commemorate the 500th anniversary of Vasco da Gama's sea voyage to India.
The Expo received around 11 million visitors in 132 days. A total of 155 countries and organizations were represented.
When Expo 98 closed its doors, this pavilion became the Lisbon International Fair Center.
The main pavilion of the 1998 Expo was transformed into a huge mall. The building currently holds many movie theaters, fashion shops, restaurants, and bars. The pavilion is covered with a double glass ceiling. Water falls between the glasses, making you feel inside a waterfall.
Expo 98-Street.
This is the Vasco da Gama Tower at Expo 98.
Parque das Nações, Nations Park, is where Expo 98 took place and is now a venue for important shows and festivals.
Chapter 13. Lisbon Points of Interest.
Here is a view of Lisbon from Castelo de São Jorge.
Here is the Lisbon area. Lisbon has three major bairros, neighborhoods, in the central area: the Cida de Baixa, Low District, the Bairro Alta, High District, and the Alfama, the oldest district.
Cruise ships dock near the 25th of April Bridge, which commemorates the date of the Carnation Revolution, ending the dictatorship in Portugal in 1974.
Most of the major sites of interest are in the Baixa, or lower district of central Lisbon.
The Baixa district is between the Bairro Alta and the Alfama districts.
Baixa means the lower town.
Here is the Baixa district with major points of reference.
The heart of the city is the Baixa downtown, or city centre. The Baixa is organized in a grid system and a network of squares built after the 1755 Lisbon Earthquake, which leveled a great portion of the medieval city.
Major points of reference for the Baixa district are the Praça Dom Pedro IV, also known as the Rocio Square, Rua Augusta running down toward the waterfront, and Praça do Comércio near the river.
This is Rua Augusta, one of the main streets of the Baixa district. The old tramways from the 1920s are one of the symbols of Lisbon. Rua Augusta is crowded during the daytime.
Close by Praça Dom Pedro IV, also known as the Rocio Square's Praça da Figueira. Elevado de Santa Justa is an elevato in the Gothic Revival style, built around 1900 to connect the Baixa and Bairro Alto.
Praça da Figueira or Figueira Square is the other main square in the Baixa area. The Praça do Comércio, or Commerce Square, is near Rio Tejo. It was the location of the Royal Ribeira Palace, Paço da Ribeira, until it was destroyed by the great 1755 Lisbon earthquake.
After the earthquake, the square was completely remodeled as part of the rebuilding of the Pombal line downtown, ordered by the Marquess of Pombal.
A bronze statue of King John I and an ornate triumphal arch form the centerpiece of the Praça do Comércio.
Baixa, the city's waterfront district, features many examples of beautiful 18th-century architecture, all part of the renovation implemented after the earthquake. Here is another view of the central Lisbon area with various points of interest. The Carmo Convent, Convento da Ordem do Carmo, is a medieval convent that was ruined in the 1755 Lisbon earthquake.
The ruins of its Gothic church, the Carmo Church or Igreja do Carmo, is the main evidence of the great earthquake still visible in the city. The Carmo Church is used as an archaeological museum, The Museu Arqueológico do Carmo, or Carmo Archaeological Museum. A major thoroughfare in Lisbon going down to the Baixa district is Avenida da Liberdade. This boulevard, built in the 19th century in the style of the Champs-Élysées in Paris, is the main avenue of the city. Avenida da Liberdade runs north for a mile, 1.6 kilometers, from Restauradores to Marquês de Pombal Square and is more than 300 feet, 90 meters, wide. Today the avenue still has a certain elegance with fountains and café tables shaded by trees, as well as a pavement decorated with abstract patterns. The city of Lisbon is rich in architecture. Romanesque Gothic, Manueline Baroque, traditional Portuguese modern and postmodern constructions can be found all over the city. The city is also crossed by great boulevards and monuments along these main thoroughfares. At one end of Rua Augusta near the waterfront is the Arco Triunfal de Rua Augusta, completed in 1873. Here is the location of Arco Triunfal de Rua Augusta near the waterfront.
The marble statues, which flank the royal coat of arms, portray Viriatus, the legendary leader of the Lusitanians in the battle against the Romans, the mariner Vasco da Gama, and Nuno Alvares Pereira, who defended Portugal's independence against the Spanish. Praça Dom Pedro IV is the main square of Lisbon in the Baixa. The Rocio is its popular name, and it has been one of the main squares since the Middle Ages. It has been the setting of popular revolts and celebrations, bullfights and executions, and is now a preferred meeting place of Lisbon natives and tourists alike.
The current name of the Rocio pays homage to Pedro IV, King of Portugal and the first Emperor of Brazil, Pedro I. His bronze statue is on top of a column in the middle of the square.
The most important building in Rocio Square is the National Theatre, the main building in the picture. At its right sits the former site of the Palace of the Inquisition. An earthquake in 1755 almost completely destroyed this district. Afterward, the neighborhood was reconstructed following a regular grid pattern. The Igreja Nossa Senhora da Conceição Velha, or the Old Church of Our Lady of the Conception, is a church that is villa notable as one of the last remnants of the Manueline style in the city. The church is in the Baixa district near the Praça do Comércio, Commerce Square. The present church is the result of a reconstruction carried out after the 1755 Lisbon earthquake, when most buildings of the city were destroyed in the earthquake and the tsunami that followed. The Praça dos Restauradores is located just north of the Rocio, at the beginning of Avenida da Liberdade. The obelisk and the sculpture commemorate the 1640 restoration of Portugal's independence from Spain. The square is dedicated to the restoration of the independence of Portugal in 1640, after 60 years of Spanish domination. The obelisk in the middle of the square, inaugurated in 1886, commemorates the Portuguese Restoration War of 1640.
The Santa Justa Elevato is one of Lisbon's most famous sights. From the top, there is a beautiful view of the Baixa district. The Elevado de Santa Justa is located near Rocio Square on Rua do Ouro. The Santa Justa lift, Portuguese, Elevado de Santa Justa, is also called Carmo lift, Elevado do Carmo. Connects downtown streets with the uphill Carmo Square.
Construction of Elevador de Santa Justa began in 1900 and was finished in 1902. The lift is 45 meters tall and made of iron. It is representative of this architectural style in Portugal, decorated in the Gothic style, with a different pattern on each story. The top story has a terrace that offers a wonderful view of Lisbon Castle, Rocio Square, and the Baixa neighborhood. This is a Portuguese postage stamp commemorating the Elevador de Santa Justa.
Among the urban lifts in Lisbon, Santa Justa is the only vertical one. Others, including Elevador da Gloria and Elevador da Labra, are funiculars that go up the slopes of Lisbon to the high district of Bairro Alta.
This is the Elevador da Gloria. From the top of Elevador da Gloria, you can see a spectacular view of the city.
This is the Elevador da Labra.
The Church of Soroc, Portuguese, Igreja de Soroc, used to be the Jesuit church of the city. Due to its rich innet decoration dating from the 16th through the 18th centuries, it is one of the main artistic treasures of Lisbon and a major tourist attraction. Alfama is the oldest district of Lisbon, spreading on the slope between the Castle of Lisbon and the Tejo River.
The name Alfama comes from the Arabic Alhama, meaning fountains or baths.
Alfama contains many important historical attractions, with many fado bars and restaurants.
Lisbon has a vivid cultural life. The city's trademark is the fado, a nostalgic and melancholic art that combines elements of narrative poetry and singing.
Fado, translated as destiny or fate, is a music genre that can be traced from the 1820s in Portugal, but with much early origins. It is characterized by mournful tunes and lyrics, often about the sea or the life of the poor. Fadistas sing about faded glory and past romances.
During the times of Moorish domination, Alfama constituted the whole of the city, which later spread to the west in the Baixa neighborhood. Alfama became inhabited by the fishermen and the poor, and its condition as the neighborhood of the poor continues to this day.
The great 1755 Lisbon earthquake did not destroy the Alfama, which has remained a picturesque labyrinth of narrow streets and small squares. Lately, the neighborhood has been invigorated with the renovation of the old houses and new restaurants where fado can be enjoyed.
This is the Castle of São Jorge and the Lisbon Cathedral in Alfama.
This shows the location of the Castle of São Jorge. This is a satellite view of the Baixa and Alfama districts. The Castelo de São Jorge is in the Amalfa district, close to and overlooking the Baixa.
On the hill is the Castelo de San Jorge, now a restored, luxurious castle, which offers spectacular views of Lisbon and the sea.
The Castelo de San Jorge, or Castle of St. George, is on the highest hill of the historic Zinta of the city.
The castle was constructed over the Roman ruins in 1147 and was the royal family's palace from the 14th to the 16th century. Here is another view of the central Lisbon area, showing the location of the Castle of São Jorge, atop the tallest hill of the central city.
The Castle of São Jorge is one of the main historical and tourist sites of Lisbon.
Santa Maria Maior de Lisboa, or Sé de Lisboa, is the Cathedral of Lisbon and the oldest church in the city. Since the beginning of the construction of the cathedral, in the year 1147, the building has been modified several times and survived many earthquakes. It is now a mix of different architectural styles. Here is another view of the central Lisbon area. The Sé de Lisboa, or Cathedral of Lisbon, is in the Alfama district but near Rua Augusta in the Baixa. Sé is short for Seat de Episcopal or Seat of the Bishop.
This is the Sé de Lisboa or Lisbon Cathedral.
The narrow, twisting streets of Lisbon's Alfama district retain much of their medieval character. The Alfama is one of the oldest and best preserved sections of Lisbon. Bairro Alta. The Bairro Alta is the upper town bordering the Baixa on the west.
This is the lateral chapels of Igreja Soclof.
This is the Baroque decoration of the lateral chapel of the Soclof church.
Igreja Soclof is in the Bairro Alta district. Belém is often referred to as the historical heart and soul of Portugal. The entire area of Belém is closely associated with the Portuguese Age of Discovery.
Belém in Brazil was named after this city in Portugal, and they are derived from Bethlehem.
Belém is a suburb of Lisbon, about 4 miles or 6 kilometers to the east of the Baixa or center of Lisbon. The natural harbor of Belém made it an ideal launching point for the exploratory voyages which turned Portugal into a major economic force. The Monastery of Jerónimos Episcopal in Belém was built in 1498 as a monument to the 15th century navigators who discovered the sea route to India. It was started on the orders of Manueline, 1515-1520, to commemorate Vasco da Gama's successful return from India.
The magnificent Hieronymites monastery, Mosteiro dos Jerónimos, can be considered the most prominent monument of Lisbon and, indeed, the most successful achievement of the Manueline Style. In 1983, UNESCO classified it as a World Heritage Site with nearby Torre de Belém. The Mosteiro dos Jerónimos was originally meant as a church for the burial of the House of Avis, but it also became a house of prayer for seamen.
Inside the Mosteiro dos Jerónimos is the Navy Museum, Museu de Marinha.
The house for the Hieronymite monks was built on the same site as the Ermida de Restelo, a hermitage that was founded by Henry the Navigator in about 1450. At this hermitage, which was already in disrepair, Vasco da Gama and his men spent the night in prayer before departing for India in 1497.
This is the cloister of the Mosteiro dos Jerónimos. This is the cloister of the Mosteiro dos Jerónimos. This is the cloister of the Mosteiro dos Jerónimos. Belém Tower, or Torre de Belém, is a fortified tower built in the early 16th century in the Portuguese late Gothic style, the Manueline, to commemorate the expedition of Vasco da Gama.
This shows the location of the Torre de Belém. Chapter 19. The Belém Tower was built from 1515 to 1521 to protect the seaward entrance of the city. This defensive yet elegant construction has become one of the symbols of the city, a memorial to Portuguese power during the Age of the Great Discoveries.
The Belém Tower is a symbol of the Age of Discovery. In 1983 it was classified, together with the nearby Mosteiro dos Jerónimos, as a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
This is a view of Belém.
Padrão dos Descobrimentos, Monument to the Discoveries, is a monument that celebrates the Portuguese who took part in the Age of Discovery of the 15th and 16th centuries. It is located on the estuary of the Tagus River in Belém, where ships departed to their often unknown destinations.
The Padrão dos Descobrimentos, Monument to the Discoveries, is in Belém along the banks of the Tagus River.
The Padrão dos Descobrimentos, or Monument to the Discoveries, was erected in 1960 in honor of the 500th anniversary of the death of Portugal's Prince Henry, the Navigator. At the right is the Ponte 25 de Abril over the Tajo River.
The Padrão dos Descobrimentos resembles a gigantic ship.
On the prow, a statue of Prince Henry leads a group of explorers, statesmen and artists. Henry the Navigator was a man of skill and great vision who gathered Portugal's best sea captains, astronomers, chart makers, and navigators to develop new principles of sailing and navigation. Such efforts led to Portugal's long-range voyages of exploration, which had never been attempted before.
Prince Henry the Navigator is the figure at the tip of the monument, looking out over the river. Behind Henry, on both sides of the monument, are statues of other great people of that era, including explorers, cartographers, artists, scientists, and missionaries. Among the 30 Portuguese personalities on the monument to the discoveries are Henry the Navigator, sponsor of the Age of Discovery; Vasco da Gama, discoverer of the sea route to India; Pedro Álvares Cabral, discoverer of Brazil; Ferdinand Magellan, first to circumnavigate the globe; Diogo Caio, first to arrive at the Congo River; Bartolomeu Dias, first to cross the Cape of Good Hope; King Manuel I, ruler during Age of Discovery; Pedro Núñez, 16th century mathematician; and Nuno Gonçalves, 15th century painter. The Padrão dos Descobrimentos has an elevator from which there are excellent views along the river Tagus, as well as across the Belém area, towards the Jerónimos monastery. The monument was originally erected in 1940 for the World Exhibition, but the existing structure was not completed until 1960. The 500th anniversary of the death of Prince Henry the Navigator. The elevator also affords an excellent view of the marble Rosa dos Ventos compass pavement decoration adjacent to the monument. This is a mosaic decoration, showing a world map with the routes of various Portuguese explorers and a wind rose. A small space within the monument hosts a multimedia exhibition on the history of Lisbon. The Belém National Palace, Palácio Nacional de Belém, is the official residence of the President of Portugal.
Palácio de Belém was among the many that the nobility built on the outskirts of Lisbon in the 17th and 18th centuries. It was later converted into a royal residence.
The Palácio Nacional de Belém was originally built in the 16th century by the nobleman Manuel of Portugal on a hill facing the Tagus, near the magnificent Jerónimos monastery.
The Vasco da Gama Bridge is a cable-stayed bridge that spans the Tagus River near Lisbon. It is the longest bridge in Europe, with a total length of 17.2 kilometers, 10.7 miles.
The bridge was opened to traffic in 1998, in time for Expo 98, the World's Fair that celebrated the 500th anniversary of the discovery by Vasco da Gama of the sea route from Europe to India.
One of the most famous museums in Lisbon is the Museu Nacional de Arte Antiga, National Museum of Ancient Art. It occupies the Palácio de Alvar Pombal, a former palace of the Count of Alvar, later purchased by the Marquis of Pombal. The Museu Nacional de Arte Antiga has its roots in 1833, with the abolition of religious orders and confiscation of the monasteries in Portugal. This made a large amount of religious art and ornaments available for public viewing.
This painting is exhibited in the Museu Nacional de Arte Antiga.
Museu Calouste Gulbenkian, Calouste Gulbenkian Museum, is a museum in Lisbon containing an impressive collection of ancient and some modern art.
The museum was founded according to Calouste Gulbenkian's last will, to accommodate and display Gulbenkian's art collection belonging now to the Calouste Gulbenkian Foundation.
The Oceanarium or Oceanario de Lisboa is an aquarium located in the Parque dos Nações. It is one of the largest aquariums in the world. The exhibition is arranged around 4 smaller aquaria, displaying the fauna and flora of the Atlantic, Pacific and Indian Oceans, and the Antarctic. It has a large central tank to exhibit species of the open ocean.
The Teatro Nacional de São Carlos is an opera house that opened in 1793 as a replacement for the Tejo Opera House. which was destroyed in the 1755 Lisbon earthquake.
This is a view of the ornate interior of the Teatro Nacional de São Carlos.
The Lisbon region is the wealthiest in Portugal, and it is well above the European Union's GDP per capita average. It produces 45% of the Portuguese GDP. Lisbon is the chief seaport of Portugal.
The Lisbon shipyard across the bay from Lisbon is one of Europe's largest. Ships have played an essential role in Portuguese history, opening new worlds of conquest and empire during Portugal's great age of exploration in the 15th century.
Today, shipbuilding is no longer a major economic activity in Portugal, but ship repair and fishing remain important to the economy. The 1998 Expo prompted a major city renewal. The decaying industrial district was transformed into a beautiful waterfront.
Facilities constructed for the 1998 World's Fair in Lisbon modernized a section of rundown waterfront in the city's northeast and opened the way for continued urban redevelopment. Today, a commercial and cultural center called the Park of Nations stands on the former fairgrounds.
Lisbon has many modern buildings including the Amoreiras Towers.
The Aqueduto das Águas Livres was constructed between 1731 and 1748 during Portugal's Second Golden Age and was the main water supply system for Lisbon. The aqueduct has 35 arches, the highest of which measures 216 feet or 66 meters, and extends for more than 30 miles or 50 kilometers. The Assembly of the Republic is a unicameral parliament composed of 230 deputies, elected for 4-year terms. For the first-time visitor to Lisbon, a good way to see the city is by hop-on hop-off bus tours. One such tour is offered by City Sightseeing.
City Sightseeing offers 2 loops every 90 minutes in duration. You can get off at any stop and reboard any time later. The buses arrive every 30 or 60 minutes and operate from 9:30 a.m. to 7 p.m.
This is a more detailed map of the blue and red loops in the city center area. Commentary is provided in English, Portuguese, French, German, Italian, Spanish, Russian, Chinese, Dutch, Polish, and Brazilian Portuguese. This is a list of stops of the City Sightseeing Blue Loop.
This is a list of stops of the City Sightseeing Red Loop. Note that stop 1, Marquês de Pombal, is the same for both the red and blue loops. And this is where transfers from one to the other can be made.
Grey Line offers another hop-on hop-off bus tour with guided commentary along the route. You can hop on and off as many times as you like throughout the day at any of the 30 stops.
Currency exchange rates can change daily. For the latest exchange rate, click on this icon. Recommended videos, Lisbon.
Recommended video, Lisbon, Portugal travel guide, must-see attractions.
Recommended video, what to do in Lisbon, Portugal. 36 hours travel videos, The New York Times.
Recommended video, how Portugal became the first global sea power.
Recommended video, The Great Age of Exploration 1400 to 1550, 30 minutes. Recommended video, How Powerful Was the Portuguese Empire?
Recommended video, Exploring the World, the Portuguese Explorers.
Recommended videos, Walking Tours of Lisbon. For a street-level experience of Lisbon, view the video Walking Tours. It's the next best thing to being there.
Recommended video, Walking Tour, Lisbon, playlist. Table of Contents, Lisbon and Portugal.
Thanks for watching. Please watch some more of my great videos.